We see in these latter days many Christians are being accused of being racist, sexist, etc., in order to counter their stand against the lies of the times. Let's look at an example of Jesus' actions in the wilderness and learn the principles so we may apply them. All right, we are back and we are live. Feet to the fire. I'm your host, James Arthur-Yanchek, the Black Knight of Talk Radio. I want to talk about today, one of the things that I find is in Christianity is people tend to look at Jesus' work as being part of his redemptive actions. It's like, in other words, what he does, well, that's because he's going to save the world, as opposed to an example of how to follow. So they say, well, he did this. Well, that's because he's Son of God. That's because he was going to die for sins. It was going to so forth. And I think we miss a lot. I mean, I'm not saying that isn't true. I just think we miss a lot of the applications of Jesus' teachings and how we could use them to live at our times now. And so what I've been thinking about, what am I doing here? I'm trying to close these windows off. It's getting a little crowded. So what I've been thinking of is how we might take an example of what is being attributed solely to Jesus' work at that moment and see what the principles that are being done in there and use that principle, that formula for our lives. And what I thought about would be the Jesus going up into the wilderness and his dealing with Satan. And, I don't know if I got the URL for the quote, and I don't know if I should read the whole thing, but I will go through. Actually, I'll bring up as I go along. But Jesus goes up to the wilderness after he has fasted for 40 days, and then the devil appears to him and tempts him, and Jesus responds to that. And so, in a theological sermon, it might be that the devil was trying to get Jesus to sin, so therefore his redemptive work would be null and void. It wouldn't work. And again, I'm not thinking that is I'm not saying that that's wrong. Are we working here? Oh yeah, there we go. I'm not saying that is not closing. Oh, here we go. It's wrong, but I think we're missing a point. We're missing some important stuff in here. And I wanted to go through this. I looked up some of the Hebrew and Greek and all this stuff and come up with some examples. One of the things I want to mention is when you're reading in the Bible, a lot of the times there are proper names in the Bible. And if you look at the words behind it, they're actual descriptors. Like you might have a name, nowadays, is it Bob? What does Bob mean? It's a name. But all throughout the ancient world, and this is in all cultures, usually the name of the person it's a character. It kind of reflects a character trait. In fact, many times the name changes throughout the years, throughout events. And when you're dealing with Satan, there's a lot of words to describe him, but they also are adjectives too. They're nouns and adjectives. So let me get my point across here before I get too convoluted. Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So now we have this. This is why he's doing this, right? And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he then became hungry. And the tempter came to him and said, now it didn't say Satan, it didn't say devil, it said tempter, descriptor, right? Descriptor. Now, in this case, I want to get back to this first thing is that Jesus at this point fasted 40 days and 40 nights. In the whole point of fasting is a spiritual cleansingness. You can go through various cultures. You can go into Native Americans getting on a vision quest. You can have these aspects where you're doing this thing to have a special, deep relationship with God. It is both denying yourself in your fleshly cravings, using your mind and your soul, your soul to focus on prayer to God. And it's very important in those times. I've done fasts several times. It's been very important in my life. And when you do these fasts, you are giving divine grace to go along with these fasts. And so the whole point here, it's a real quick sentence, but Jesus has done this stuff as a human and as his interaction with God, right? There's aspects of what he did was from humanity. Not eating, it's going to affect your humanness, right? So there's this testing or taming of the flesh, the spirit, and allowing the spirit to have authority. And when you do these things, there's a blessing and a learning, and it's a very, very nice situation. Now, Jesus just did this, and then he goes into the wilderness, and the tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become your bread. Now, I think we're looking at Jesus being the Son of God in the theological sense, and again, not saying that's not the case, but I would look at this as a human learning from the situation. You being one who is a son of God, I claim to be a son of God. God is my Father. So if God is your Father, right, and command these things, these stones, to have bread. And Jesus has said, when he looked at his miracles, what I've done, you can do and more. So being a follower, a son of God, even in the non-Jesus sense, but in our own sense, we have particular powers. Now, in Jesus' case, had bigger, more demonstrative, in-your-face powers. So it applies in obvious ways to him. But if I can apply this verse to us specifically, hey, if you say you're a believer in God and all this stuff, then say, hey, God, I need some food, or what have you. And Jesus' response was, man does not live by bread alone. There's the flesh stuff, but every word that comes from the mouth of God, quoting an earlier verse from the Old Testament. So what we see in here is that we have these, you make a goal for yourself. You're now fasting, your body is rebelling. Any type of satanic connections or harassments are going to be affected by this denying of the spirit, the flesh, where these connections come through in that area, where those are the buttons that are pushed, the lust of the flesh. So you're denying yourself on there. So now you can justify in food. You can say, well, I can break this fast and come up with a justification. So that would be, in our case, the more basic application of it is that when you are doing a project for God, getting closer to God, and getting this connection, you're denying the flesh and boosting the spirit, you might be able to justify in your mind, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just eat this, or I won't eat that, or I'll do these things, or whatever your thing is. It's not even about just fasting. But if you're doing a project for God, I mean, you're trying to find God. So I'm not going to watch porn, right? I'm going to say you were into porn before, and I'm not doing porn or whatever. You're not going to do porn, but I can watch an R-rated movie. It's not porn. You see what I mean? I'm just trying to come up with the idea of you're trying to justify. And then what Jesus' response, giving it a broader context, is you shouldn't live on the material, but on the spiritual. that comes from God. So don't focus on the material, watching TV, the porn, or whatever. Whatever aspect it is, don't focus on the material. You focus on the spiritual coming from God. And that was his response back to the material temptation. And then we see the word the devil. And so we had the tempter before, and now we have the devil. I look up the word, the Greek word. It is diablo. I got to find it now. I have it all marked here for a change. Diabolos, slanderous, falsely accusing. So the bare word that's being used here, diabolos, has to do with slanderous and falsely accusing. It's also used as a noun, to refer to a slanderer. You're a diabolos, you're a slanderer, and of course the father of all lies and slanders would be the devil. So you see how the word actually means something other than just a proper name. And it kind of makes it more applicable to us when you're looking at the points here, rather than looking at Jesus as the person, the devil as the person, and it's just between those guys. And wow, look how good Jesus did. That's wonderful. No, this is a example of what will happen to all of us. If you stand up and try to do something for God, you will be tempted to dissuade yourself from that. And when people, for example, we're looking right now, we're standing up talking about lies in the media and in the politics that's going on, the transgender stuff, the abortion and all this. We're standing up against these lies. And so they turn around and say, well, we're going to have to ban you from YouTube or whatever, your venue. You'll lose your Visa card. You'll use your insurance or whatever. That's going to be the material threat, or the temptation is to stop doing this stuff because these material things. And so you see how that applies. And the devil took him up, the Diablo, the deceiver, took him up to took him along into the holy city and had him stand on a pinnacle of the temple and said, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will give your angels orders concerning you, and on their hands they will lift you up. Now, a couple of things there. The first one was material testing, right? The second one is it's going to be more of the power ego testing. Like Jesus is claiming, if you're a son of God, if your God is your father, then you can throw yourself down and he'll lift you up. Because it says it right here in the Bible, it says this. And I actually looked up that verse, Psalm 91, to confirm, to demonstrate, I guess. That's not, this is written, perhaps David is in the Psalm, was written as a praise to God. I gotta find the. Look up Psalm 91 to get the whole aspect of it. But here we go. For he gives his angels orders concerning you to protect you in all your ways. They will lift up on their hands. They will lift you up, so that you not strike your foot against a stone. You will walk upon the lion and the cobra. You will trample down the young lion and the serpent, because he has loved me. I will save him. That's a quote like from God. He will set him securely in a high place, because he is known by my name. You could read the idea. But my whole point of bringing this up is this is not concerning a quote that God has given to Jesus personally. Well, while that's true, it's also generically spread out for people who would be the sons of God, or consider God their father, or in a modern context, Christians. And Jesus replied to him, on the other hand is written, you shall not put your Lord God to the test. Now, some people think that this is applied to Jesus, like the devil is testing Jesus. Okay, and I'm not even going to, I'm not going to say that's not the case, but I apply it in this context we're looking at now. Is the devil is asking him to test? Hey, if you're a son of God, test your father and see. He says he'll do this, so let's see it in action. Let's see him do it. And you're saying you should not test I'm not going to test my father. I have faith in it, and as things are should be, they shall be, they will be. And then for the last one, we're having the first one being a material test, the second one being like a test of faith. Do you really have faith in God to keep your foot from hitting a stone? You said it. You have faith in him. And Jesus' response was, don't test. I'm not going to test my father. I have faith in him. I'm not going to test him. And then again, Diablo took him up to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms in the world and their glory, and said to him, all these things I will give you if you fall down and worship me. A lot of stuff in there. All these things I will give you. He has the authority to give them in a material sense. Jesus could become the material king of the world with Satan having the authority of being the Lord of this world. I will give that to you for don't worship me, which of course would defeat the whole, aspect of it. And Jesus says, go to him, go away, Satan. No, I looked up the word Satan. Not saying it's not a proper word, a proper name, but also that word comes from as an adversary. It's an adversary. So when someone is called Satan, the generic use of it would be calling him, you're an adversary. And also, if you were familiar or aware of astrology, Saturn, which is where Satan comes from, this quote Saturn return, comes by and tests and accuses all the things that you should have learned during that cycle. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying this principle's around, right? This is me saying that Satan is not just a proper name. This is around. It's around in other religions even. Right? So the whole aspect of this is important to learn I got to go back to what did I do? Here it is. So he says, you worship me. And Jesus says, go away, Satan. Go away, adversary. For it is written, you shall worship the Lord God and serve him only. And the deceiver, Diablo, left him, and behold, angels came and began to serve him, minister to him. This was the King James application of it. So, what you see is a great aspect of it. Now, if you fall into this cycle where someone is accusing you or tempting you to get away from what you should be doing for God, and you follow that, you follow this kind of program, and you say no, and I'm not going to yield to the material. I'm not going to yield to questioning my faith, and I'm not going to yield to the psychopathic power temptation. And I believe in the King James it has an extra verse. Some of these manuscripts have a verse here and there, a word here and there. The devil left and came to him waited for another time. I believe it says. I should have been prepared. Well, I think I can do that real quick. I seem to remember that from my own personal days. Okay. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to bring up verse 12 just to make sure. Okay. There must be another application of this. So I'm just sticking in Matthew for convenience. So when you do these things, it's a formula of I'm doing something for God that I know is good for God. It's going to bring me closer to God. I'm going to understand God. I'm going to have an intimacy with God. I'm going to do these type of things. As soon as you do that, you bring the attention to the dark side. It's like you're a beacon. It's like when you do get this extra closeness and extra, there's like a light goes on, and it's like, oh, hey, James is doing this. So send somebody over there. So then they come over and try to tempt you with material aspects, which you're losing. Because usually what happens is when you do things for spiritual, for God and for goodness, it's going to be at the detriment to material goods. I mean, it's generally the point. You can't serve God and mammon is a good example. It's going to be material goods are going to be lost as you follow the divine principles to get closer to God. Because, God is a spirit. God is not material. We're going to be leaving this material plane when we die. We're going to be in a spiritual area. You could see how that all works out. So when you do something like that, when you're called by God to do something that will bring you closer to God, you will be tempted on the material. You'll be tempted on your faith of it, and you'll be tempted on the power that you can do if you not go that way. I mean, well, I like the movie Ten Commandments. Now, I understand it's a movie. I understand there's drama and liberty has been taken in the movie. But the principle that I get from, in fact, people even, historians even say that Moses was taken from an Egyptian story or whatever. It don't matter to me. This is all distractions, right? What I liked about Moses is Moses could have risen to power as a pharaoh, and he could have freed the Israelis, right? But he wouldn't lie to his, because of course the brother, the accuser, Satan in this case being Ramses in the movie anyway, he brought him out and gave him a chance. He would have to lie to his father, who he loved, earthly father. He would have to lie to him in order to do it. And then if he would have lied to it, in order to make it easier to use the material advantage of doing it to let the Hebrews go. But he didn't. He stuck close to it, ended up getting, going to literally the wilderness, talking about Jesus going to the wilderness, literally went through the wilderness and ended up coming where they were freed by divine, intervention rather than material gain type of thing. I see how you can apply it. You can apply it to every stuff in your life. I mean, that's why I look at churches when they have these mega churches where there's $1 million crystal palaces. I'm not judging them like, hey, you should do this. I don't understand that. I don't understand the material aspects of doing that in order to gain a spiritual growth for the parishioners. I don't get that. I don't get it. And so I wouldn't do that. I mean, no one's asking me, but this is where it comes down to. So when you do these things that are based on a physical, or based on you getting closer to know God, that's what it is. When you do that, you're going to get pushback from the material, going to question your faith, and it's going to give you an alternative road to get to a twisted version of what you wanted to do. Now, that's my whole point of bringing this up is that here's an example that most people, I'm not saying you do, okay, you listener at this moment, whoever you are. I'm not saying you do this, but I have noticed, even in my own life, of how I was brought up and looked at these verses, that we're seeing Jesus in action, and we're going, wow, Jesus is great. And he is. I love Jesus, and I do. And he is a salvation and all this stuff, and that's true. All right, that's not. I'm not taking away from that at all. But I think that we're missing that Jesus, his actions in his lifetime, the man Jesus, inspired by the Spirit of God within, did these things, and they are examples for us. Like, for example, the Lord's Prayer. When you pray the Lord's Prayer, you can say it verbatim. Nothing wrong with that. But I think what Jesus was saying is that these are the principles that should be in your conversation. Our Father who art in heaven. You're simply saying, Our Father. We're acknowledging the Father of God who is in heaven as opposed to my earthly father, right? Hallowed be thy name. You're praising him. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. You want his kingdom to come. You want his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. So you can say that, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good prayer. But I am looking at saying you're to learn those principles so that when you pray, those things that's the atmosphere within your prayer. You're learning a principle. You're learning like a formula. And it's not a formula like, if that, then this. It's not a mechanical formula. It's a principle that if you follow these principles, and I don't mean follow them, again, in a legalistic sense, because then you get a ritual which is meaningless. You enter me with their lips, but their hearts is far away from me. You want to have the heart close. You're speaking from the heart. And when you're praying to God, you can pray to him and simply tell him you love him. You're worshiping him and all this stuff, and you're asking things from him. And the principles you're asking for is if you say, well, I want this certain thing to happen. Well, I'm not saying it's a bad prayer, but God knows what you want before you even ask it. Jesus talks about it again in one of his verses. Why would you ask, would a father give his son a stone when he asks for bread? Well, how much greater in your earthly father can give you. So I'm thinking like, it's almost like he knows what you want and need better than you do. So you're kind of going like, here's what I'm doing. Here's my principle. Here's what I want to go. But I want the best, and you know what's best. And I yield to your guide. If this way is kind of like, well, I can understand why God would say like, I can understand why you're doing it, but it's a little off. So we're going to say no. We're going to say wait. We're going to wait a little bit and get more information, and then you could be more accurate. This is the kind of conversation I think you can have with God, and that's what's found in the Lord's Prayer. But we being Christians, churches, have taken these things as like a formula, as like a ritual, that you just say these things. Yes, I've memorized the Lord's Prayer, and you're happy with that. No, that's fine. But are you living the Lord's Prayer in your communications? Are you looking at those principles and saying like, I should be looking, I'm here, God, here's my goal. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm doing. Can you give me some guidance? Show this. I need these doors to open. If you want other doors to open, that'll be better. Fine. If you want me to wait, that's fine. This is what I mean. This is the kind of conversation I think that God wants to have with you. And this is what Jesus, the man Jesus' goal was to live out the principles, to being the living word. I mean, the Logos, the living word. Here's Jesus, the human, and you're a human. I'm a human. We're to live out the living word just like he did. And we have different jobs and different things we can do and different talents and aspects and opportunities and limitations. And all those things are going to be customized in our walk in life to what we can be, the best we can be, all for helping God be God's skin on earth. And God won't ask you to do anything. Here's another Jesus quote comes up. Take upon you my yoke, and it is light and easy to bear. It's that God knows what you can do and what can happen. Now, all that being said, you also notice that the disciples, were all persecuted as well as Jesus was all persecuted. Jesus said, if they do this to the master, of course they'll do it to the students or the slaves or what have you, the servants. So what I also would say in this is that seems to be cycling back to those days. And now for those who stand for Jesus and the principles they are, of course you have to, again, examine yourself to see if you are becoming ego-based, material-based, fear-based. You got to avoid get rid of all that stuff. But because people are pointing out the evils that are openly in the world now, they're just openly, blatantly in the world, they're blatantly lying. People are dying, and it's just like this stuff has always happened throughout time. And in certain places, it was that blatant. You got a king or an emperor or what have you. They're going to be that blatant about, hey, I'm the king, I can kill you if I want to, or whatever. But to have this come out now universally is what I'm saying. We're coming out universally, and we're coming out of a country now that has given down Christian principles and standards for equality for all that have been fine-tuned as different errors, sin natures have been exposed. And, slavery is a big thing. Oh, slavery, this and that. Well, this country actually got rid of slavery, and there's still slavery going on now in other countries. And so it's like, yeah, it wasn't a good thing, but it's all part of growing up. It's learning from your past and moving on and not berating you. And this is what Lucifer, Satan, Lucifer is no descriptor, and it could be applied to anybody, a bearer of light, pretending to be a light and being a wolf and all that sheep's clothing. But when you have these things coming out, and we're now showing they're wrong, we're going to be nailed for doing that. And we're coming into a time now where in other points, in other time frames throughout life, there would be buffer zones, and it wouldn't be that dramatic. Some places here, some places there. Now this is going to be universal. So we're looking into this type of thing. So I personally, and the reason why I'm even saying this stuff here is that I personally think it's time to go into these examples and the stuff Jesus did really good, really close, because we're really going to need them. Because we're going to be put up to the test. I mean, right, some people has claimed the vaccination to be 666 and market abuse and all that, and it's possible. I mean, we can have a whole discussion on that, and I'm not going into it at the moment. But there may have a point. You want to make a decision. Like, I can't do this. You could do it on a medical basis, a scientific basis, or you could do it on a spiritual basis. You got to make a stand. And if you think you shouldn't do it and do it, now you're a hypocrite. And the funny thing about being a hypocrite, it doesn't even mean that the original action was wrong. You think it's wrong, and you do it anyway. It doesn't matter if it was even wrong. It matters as you think it's wrong. Is as you judge, so shall you be judged. It's very important stuff. And the only reason why I'm getting kind of worked up during these times is, the clock is ticking here. We're getting into these latter days, and even if that aside, you could die at any time and move on to the next level. You want to make sure you get what you can done here. What I'm going to do one of these days, I have to put more time into it to be able to. I started out poorly here, for those who are still listening, no. But the Beatitudes is the greatest thing written down, I think, spiritual thing written down. And learning what they mean in all their depth and living that out is the best way you can water and feed the soil for the seed of God's to grow in it. Right there is like the greatest sermon. Some have argued, well, it actually was men or sermons that were put together. Keep that argument. Keep all that stuff. It don't matter to me. It contains truth, and it is applied to yourself. It's fantastic stuff. And people try again. You try to justify. When Jesus was talking about the Good Samaritan, and somebody after he says, well, who's my neighbor? And it's like, that's when he leads into Good Samaritan. Well, love your neighbor. Who's my neighbor? I see how you try to get out of that stuff. I'm telling you, some of the people are Christians in Bible studies and all that. They're doing it. Don't even, we all do it. I'm not saying it because I've avoided this trap because I'm holy. No, I've been there. I've done all of this stuff. That's how I can even recognize it as my own, like, wow, And again, you don't have to beat yourself up. It's like you see, Jesus dealt with the prostitute. She didn't deny, didn't try to get out of it, didn't try to explain why she's doing it, didn't say, I need money for my food and kids. It didn't say anything. She didn't respond knowing that it was wrong. Whatever the reasons, whatever the justification. All Jesus' response, good, go and sin no more. It's as simple as that. You don't have to go beat yourself up. Now, there's some things you may do that will get the ire of the culture laws, and you may have to deal with that, and that's fine. That's different. Caesar, you enter to Caesar, and when God is God. So I would exhort you to read these things that Jesus does in the light of, what can I do to emulate that? What's the principles here so that when I'm doing something, this applies to it, I use this as a guide to get through it. And in the case of this, whenever you're doing something to bring your life closer and more intimately with God, you're going to get pushback from it. I mean, heck, you can give yourself pushback from yourself. I mean, your own body, your own fleshly desires can do enough pushing back. You don't even have to have a spiritual intervention or other people working on behalf of Satan and intervening. So I hope that helped. And look at these things. That's why it's good to also, if you look up, I have, what is this called? The BibleHub.com. It allows you to put in verses, and it'll give you the Greek or Hebrew, and then give you references to, you can go into greater depth of what the word means and so forth. Today I was just talking about that people's names mean something, and that could apply to us even though our names aren't involved, literally, whether it be Jesus or Satan. We're not actually Jesus or Satan, but we could be in a position that those names and that what they say apply and mean. So I hope that was helpful. I got a lot of these things to do, so give me some kind of comments or feedback if you think this is fine. And I just, I could put probably better. I'm not, I'm doing this off the cuff as opposed to like writing it out and all this stuff, because I can't sight read, and it'll be terrible. And at the time to do it all, but I know the stuff print by principle, so it may be a little rough around the edges as I do them, but yeah, I think it's stuff that's really helped me anyway. So I'm just basically sharing what's helped me. And in that case, we will see you next time. Ancient One, my old friend, the one who walked before, the one who will walk again. We'll see you.
Retell your timeless truths. Oh, ancient one. Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.